We will now move to the Q&A session of the program. For this session, we will open the floor for questions. This session will be moderated by Dr. Tan Zoe, Deputy Executive Director for Biomedical Research Council, BMRC. To our audience, if you have any questions, you may wish to walk to the nearest standing mics, either on the right or the left side, or you may raise your hands to get mics from our very friendly colleague. With that, while we wait for the guys to set up the place, we'd like to invite Prof. Tan and Dr. Mani up on stage for the Q&A session.
Well, thank you so much for coming this afternoon, and I guess all of you will be equally as I am, impressed with Mani's journey and also sharing. I think what he has shared actually boils down in very much also the fact of how, in a sense, when he first started the introduction about Singapore, we really started off as 50 years ago with really a difficult situation, being forcefully out into independence, and how we in the early days and even today managed to create a lot of value by sheer drive and entrepreneurial nature. And this is really what we continue to aspire for as we celebrate our Silver Jubilee next weekend. I am going to ask that for those of you who want to pose questions to Mani, introduce yourself. And perhaps as a start, I could also like to ask Mani, as really as someone who has gone into this journey about, close to about 40 years ago and to today, and hopefully you can get the lights back on again, is whether is there any change in the environment as you see when you are doing, getting yourself inventing things in your garage, and the environment then and the environment today? You know, for some of the people in the room, they're also looking at trying to solve our medical needs of today.
Sure. Probably the one thing that I wanted to say is one thing that hasn't changed. What hasn't changed, at least in this state of Minnesota where I'm involved with, and in most of the parts of our country as well, is that there's still the creative energy to continue to develop products to make healthcare the best possible thing. We see it in California, we see it in Minnesota, we see it in a variety of technologies, be it cardiac, neuro, pulmonary, a variety of different things. So it's still there. But the biggest change, however, unfortunately, has been that the regulatory environment is still getting more and more difficult. Case in point, when we did the first CPI pacemaker, we opened the doors on February of 1972, and by November of 1972, we had our first human implant. Okay, and those pacemakers keep going. There was no regulatory environment at that time. We self-imposed ourselves to do testing, the necessary work with clinicians and doing our own clinical studies. But we did not have the environment that we have today. My last Class 3 product that's been approved was the ATS valve. And that took me 10 years from the day we opened the doors to FDA approval. And that environment continues to get, in my opinion, even worse. That is probably driving our industry to other countries where the environment is not so stringent, not so crazy. This is probably one reason why we're sitting here in Singapore. Can we continue our work here with some greater ability to get our jobs done?
Right, thanks. Anyone from the audience would like to take the opportunity to pose many burning questions that you have? Feel free to approach the mic.
Come on, ask me questions. Let me ask you a question then, if we don't have one coming this way. Does everyone understand the work that we're presently doing with the veins of the legs? Was I clear on what we're trying to accomplish of strengthening these veins so that bypass surgery doesn't have to fail after 5, 6, or 7 years? It can continue for the lifetime of the patient. Did we get that point across? I hope so. Okay, I see a lot of yes, okay. Come on, you got questions, please?
I guess it's very similar.
Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah.
I'm Fuad from National University of Singapore. I guess the method is very similar to the way that they put a stent outside the graft at the anastomosis.
Right.
Yeah, but so it covers the whole graft.
Yeah, I should have shown the video. I have a video, but it takes a long time. What we basically do is we put a mesh on the outside of the vein just to give it strength. We believe that with the pressure of the heart, the vein is going to dilate. And when it dilates, it goes from one diameter to a much bigger diameter, and the inside lining gets disrupted, gets injured, and the body reacts by developing scar tissue or what we call hyperplasia. And that injury and the resulting hyperplasia is going to hurt the success of that implant 5, 6, 7 years down the road. Okay? But if we put this mesh on the outside, it prevents it from dilating, so there's no injury.
Yes, my point is that there is currently a method that they do the same thing, but instead of a mesh, they use a stent.
Hold the mic closer. I can't.
There is currently a method that they do this, but instead of the mesh, they use a stent outside the graft. But it will cover only very near to the anastomosis. They just put a stent, bare metal stent outside the graft.
Yeah, we put this outside. We don't put anything on the inside. I don't understand your question.
No, it's not a question. I'm just saying the method is very similar to the current method, but it will cover the whole graft instead of only the end of the graft, the distal section near to the anastomosis.
I'm sorry, I'm just not understanding your question. I apologize. Maybe
It's
my
not a
ears.
question. It was just a comment.
I think it might be my ears or something like that. But I hope you understand simply, or you can grab me later and we could do it on paper or
Sure.
whatever. I hope you understand what we're trying to accomplish.
Thank you for sharing. You mentioned a lot about risk-taking. Could you share with us what was one of your most memorable risks that you have taken? And if you could live your life all over again, what is something that you have done differently from all these experiences?
I think
More recent. Sorry, it must be the ears. I had them checked just recently. I was at the Mayo Clinic. They said, you're okay on the ears. So you want to know what most memorable what?
Risks that you have taken. Yeah.
Oh, risk.
Yeah.
Most memorable risk. Wow. Over those years, I've had a lot of them. Okay. Taking a risk. Okay. Could you imagine going to the first implant of a product that you have made? In this case, we were doing the St. Jude heart valve. Okay, never been implanted. And we were in the evening at the University of Minnesota. And I was watching them, very nervous, sweat going down my back. And all of a sudden, they took out from Mrs. Helen Heinkinen was the name of the patient. Okay, and they took out her diseased valve. Okay, it was an aortic valve. And they took it out, and then they just put it right in the garbage can. And it was gone. And all of a sudden, there was a hole there. Okay? And I came to the realization, I'm risking this patient's life if I don't fill that hole up with something good immediately. Okay? Those are the kind of risks that I've had to take. The other risk, of course, is just doing a company, starting a company. Okay? You have to make a decision, and the first thing you have to realize is that when you make the decision to start a company, guess what? Your old company doesn't pay you any salary anymore. okay? And as I said, you go to your spouse and you sit down with your spouse or your better half or your husband or wife and start talking about this. And you say to your wife, honey, I'm going to start a company. And she's going to say, you're not going to get paid anymore. And she's going to say to you, what about the food bills? What about the mortgage in the house? Oh, and by the way, I'm pregnant. Okay? And those are the risks that you take when you're, that's probably your biggest risk, just the first day of making that decision to do it. And for me, those were memorable risks. And many times it isn't a case where, you're working at a company and all of a sudden you say, I can do that better. And you decide just to go and try it. Sometimes you really have to stop and think and say, I'm going to make a commitment. And usually, the big ones take a decade out of your life. 10 years. Now, for a young person that's still in his or her 20 or 30 years old, that means half of your life, 50%. Okay? But it's a long time. And so that's a risk. Am I going to do that? I'm going to have to stick to it for 10 years. When I'm talking to young people and working with young entrepreneurs, and they ask me for advice and all that, the one challenge I always see is, are you ready to commit, make that big step and take 10 years out of your life to pursue that? Are you willing to know that you're going to play it all? I remortgaged my house. I could have lost my house. All those kinds of things. So those are risks. I wish I could really emphasize some of the risks that you're going to have to take. Okay? I hope I've answered your question.
Hi, I'm Mary.
Hi, Mary. Good to talk to you again.
So
She was one of those stars that I was sitting outside with, telling you about. I was so impressed by the young people that are out there, the future entrepreneurs of this country.
Thanks for advertising. Incidentally, she's a biodesign fellow.
She what?
It's one of the fellows in the biodesign program.
All right.
Yeah, you mentioned about the patent that you decided not to file a patent for the valve that you finally managed to crack the code on it, right? So what's your take on filing a patent now? Because we are all encouraged first to file, and you need to have a patent before you can seek funding or venture. So
You're talking about funding and how to do funding and all that?
And how
Wow.
to deal with patents and funding.
Yeah.
I think the question is that sometimes investors, VCs, when they look at individuals who pitch ideas, and especially a startup, they sometimes ask, do you have anything to protect your technology? I think the question here is that one approach is to file. I think yours approach is something to keep it a trade secret, but perhaps perhaps your based on your experience, how do you approach this with protecting your technology?
So when you're doing funding, how do you protect your technology? Is that what the question is? Well, your initial funding of any company is going to be, most of the time, 90% of the time, it's going to be through friends, family, okay? And you got to believe they're going to be nice to you. I would even be nice to you, okay, Mary? So I wouldn't worry about the patentability of your technology. When you're raising money, you don't have to reveal every single thing about your technology. You have to reveal things that would be pretty well common sense. All right, you're going to develop a product, and the product is this. You don't have to, when you're raising money, say we're going to do this, and this is how it's done. You just have to say, this is what I want to do. This is the goal that I want to accomplish. Okay. We have designed a certain thing, and we have patents on it, or we are in the midst of trying to get patents and things like that. You don't have to reveal that. If they want that, be very careful. And first of all, have them sign an NDA. Now, I don't know what the rules are in this country. In our country, it's very, very strict. You don't fool around with an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. You don't fool around. You're saying, I will honor the confidentiality of the patent, and I will honor that. There are some countries I know in the world that unfortunately do not respect that, in which case you got to be careful that how you raise money if you're going to raise money in that country. Don't worry too much about it. Just don't worry too much about it, okay? You'll be more concerned after you're successful, okay? Then once you're successful and you said to the world, you see my technology works, then there will be people saying, oh, Mary's got a good idea there. Let's see how we can get around Mary's patents, or how to get through Mary's patent, or forget about Mary, let's just do it. Because there are those types of people. Don't be so much worried when you're first starting, okay? Because you haven't proven anything that it works or it doesn't, right? Okay? But once you are successful, then you have, make sure your patents are in order. And the other thing is, even if you see somebody, invading your patent or infringing your patent, don't be so much in a hurry to sue them or do something like that, because you're wasting a lot of time and money, okay? It costs a lot, all right? And many times, the one that's trying to follow you will fall down anyway. But if it does get to a point where it's really serious and you are doing a big business, then it's time to do something about it. But don't worry about it at the beginning. Don't. It's not worth it. In our country, for example, if someone was to do the same business that I'm doing, I couldn't stop them, because they have the time, the ability to do a total clinical trial, which in our country can take 10 years or more, okay? And, before you can really take action to stop that company or that individual. The questions are coming. There we go.
Yeah, encouraged by the young ladies.
Yeah. The young ladies are the ones that got it started here.
That's right. I'm a surgeon in a local hospital, Tan Tock Seng Hospital, urologist as well. So I have two questions. One is from the inventor side. I'm also part of the funding side. So talking about the inventing side, I'm encouraged by your success story, but I also understand there are also many other failures who didn't really make it to your stage. So in your career, what are the principles of failure to avoid that you can teach us, like knowing when to stop thinking you are having the best product? We all think that we have, but what are the principles, and identify that what you have may not be the number one, but maybe number 2 or 3, and is it worthwhile going through? So that's my first question.
Failures.
How to identify and keep it level-headed.
Okay. In our, if I may tell a story about baseball. Remember I told you I like baseball? In our country, we have a game of baseball, and we have, just like you have in this country, you do a lot of soccer, and you have great players who play soccer, and I don't know the names of the great players. But in our country in baseball, one of the greatest players of all time was a guy named Mickey Mantle. Mickey Mantle was considered the best, okay? And he used to play in my hometown, the Bronx, New York. Great player. And when you miss the ball 3 times, we call it strikeout. So you go back, you miss the ball 3 times, you're out of luck, okay? Strikeout. And very few people know that Mickey Mantle, who was one of the greatest hitters of all time, held the record for the most strikeouts. But why was he a great player if he had so many strikeouts, Manny? Was because he got up every day and swung the bat. And he reached for the impossible. He always tried to hit what we call home runs, to hit the ball out of the park, as we say. Okay? When you do that, you're going to have a lot of strikeouts. Well, the same thing in the business, at least in the medical device business. I fortunately or unfortunately go after the really hard ones, the impossible ones. changing surgery, changing the way we do things and all those. I don't just go to make a little bit of a difference. I go after the big ones. And as a result, I've had failures, okay? I had a company called Cabbage Medical in which we tried to design an artificial graft and failed, okay? But we tried it. I mean, as far as you can swing, going for the Holy Grail, and you fail. Fortunately, I've had situations where the failure mechanism was so evident and so fast that it was relatively easy to understand that you should stop it and shut it down, okay? The hard ones are like, for example, in Kips Bay Medical, the work that we're doing now. We've had failures with our mesh. As I say, we've had patients in which the mesh didn't perform the way we wanted it to. And you can easily just say, okay, let's all go home. But no, we stuck to it. We reviewed everything. We reviewed the scientific works and tried to understand why did it fail and stuff like that. And we found that our failure mechanisms are primarily caused by the first challenge we knew we were going to have with this, and is how do you implant it? How do you select the patient? And we still have that challenge. We're still going through an FDA trial. It's costing us a lot of money because we still have to prove to the FDA that it can be implanted successfully. So do we give up? It's hard. It's hard to give up. Okay, sometimes you don't have a choice. Like, for example, with Kips Bay, if we are at a point now where we say if we can't raise the additional finance, we're going to have to give it up. Okay? But you can't be afraid of failure. Because if you're afraid of failure, you're never going to do anything. I always say, if you don't cross the street, there's trucks going across the street. If you don't cross the street, you're never going to get on the other side. You'll be safe on this side, but you can't get across to the other side. You've got to take a risk, okay? If you believe you have a technology in which there is a need, you've got to first believe there's a need and prove to yourself there is a need for this. Go for it. Go for it, okay? And you're not going to be criticized. You missed. No one's going to call you, you're a dummy. No one's going to say that to you. It's not going to happen. You're going to be admired for taking that risk and going after your passion. Don't be afraid to take risk. Don't be afraid of failure. Don't go looking for it, but don't be afraid of it.
Thanks. So I guess everyone in this audience also take risks.
Sure.
That's why they are here to listen to you. But I also want to, now my second question is a funder side, working for also a private equity and for startups. So how do I identify young people who tell me things that they want only money, and how do I recognize young startups or people who are looking for money, because every time they will have a higher burn rate, to know that they only tell me a little, but I want to know more, but they don't tell me. So what are the tricks I can find based on your experience that you try to hide from the funders? What do I look for? Thank you.
How do you know if they're telling you everything? Is that what you're saying? Wow. Is there any psychology majors in here? Okay? Because you have a client right over here. I suppose the selection of your team, selection of people, is something that you may be good at, you may not be good at. I don't know. I think I've been pretty fortunate in selecting good people. But how did you do it, Manny? I don't know how I did it. Okay? I've just been fortunate. That's a good question. Sure, I've had people that come in, tell me that the greatest thing since sliced bread, only to find out that they're, forget about them, okay? You have that. That happens in life, okay? When you're starting out companies, I always say when you select your team, make sure that you're selecting the best person that you can find and not necessarily your friend. A lot of young people say, I'm going to put a company together and I'm going to take 2 or 3 of my friends and we're going to start this company. No, 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 no. You need an engineer, go and get the best engineer. You need a good finance person, go and get a good finance person. Now, if he happens to be your friend, that's okay. But don't go and hire your friends. Hire the best that you can get. All right? You're going to have to sell your idea, by the way. I forgot to mention that in my presentation, that you got to be selling all the time. Okay? It takes, you have to sell your concept, you have to sell the person. Mary, I want you to join me. Mary, I can't give you a big salary. Mary, vacation, I don't even know if we have vacation. You know, Mary, it's full of risk. You have to sell to her your idea. So you're constantly selling. And hopefully, you're selling to the best person that you think you can get. By the way, I said Mary, and let me just say one thing. What I have noticed in this country is the amount of women that you have in positions of responsibility, where women here really are participating in the formation and running of companies. I really was, you know, I'm sorry you don't see that much in our country. We see them, but more and more, but not as prominently as I see in here in Singapore.
Thanks for the comment. Interest of time, we'll take 1 or 2 more last. Yes?
Yeah, my name is Shrikant. I'm a bioengineer and a medical device regulator. My question to Manny is, in the initial days, how did you overcome the challenges of communicating with doctors, especially the medical terms, and adopting your technology, especially since you didn't come from a medical or a doctor background, didn't have a medical degree?
Am I understanding your question being, how do you get doctors to use your product, your device, your service? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and how did you learn get to communicate with the doctors in the first place?
You should share your experience about sitting outside the OT and reading the medical book, you know.
Yeah. How do you learn? One day I showed a picture before of Dr. Nikoloff, and he came up to me and he said, Manny, now that you've done the pacemaker, we're going to do heart valves. And I know nothing about heart valves. In fact, I actually tell people I did not know how to name the 4 valves in your heart. So how did we learn it? He said, we're going to learn. And he went to his library and he had a book on heart valves. And he said, I want you to read that book. And he went and we went to a bookstore and we bought 3 more books. So I gave a book to each of the members of my team. And you would walk into our office and what would we be doing? Reading. Okay? You have to learn your technology. And you have to learn to be the best in that field. Okay? If you're working on a new device, get somebody to teach you, get a doctor, do the books, get into the OR, go into a hospital and all that. Learn so that when you go out to, eventually you hope to sell that product. But in the meantime, before you can get to selling that product, learn that product so that you are as good as or better than the average physician. Remember, a doctor has to learn this much knowledge. But in your field, and maybe I don't know what you're making, but whatever field you're making, okay, if it's a stimulator of some sort, okay, that doctor only knows that much about stimulators. He knows this much about medicine, but only this much about stimulators. But you have to know this much about medicine and this much about stimulators. You have to be the expert. He wants you to come into the OR because you're going to be the expert in there. You're going to teach him how to do that, or her. The surgeon, he or her, he or she will call you because you're smarter. I don't know what other way of doing it. You learn and then you sell. I mean, that's what you have to do. But there's no secret thing. Be the expert.
My name is Crispina. I'm
Sure.
currently still an employee in ASA. So I just have two questions here for you. So we learned so much from you in terms of your experiences in Minnesota. We also know that US is currently the biggest market for medical devices. So you also did mention that you came to Singapore 8 years ago. You did first bypass surgery and experiences here was great. So could you share with us, because I have been with Dr. Tan Zhe Wee, we have been developing this medical device space in Singapore. How would you benchmark the current medical devices space in Singapore compared to Minnesota itself? And the second question is, how do you think the trend is moving, for the interventional space in Asia-Pac region itself? Thanks.
First of all, I don't know how you compare, Minnesota and Singapore, but what I see in Minnesota still is innovation, still ideas. Wow, I hear so many ideas. God, how come I didn't think of that? Or, new things are still coming out. But then comes, what happens after that idea? And that is the rollout of the idea, the development of the idea, the manufacturing of the idea, the clinical trials of the idea, all of those things. I see that in Singapore, you have a faster rollout environment. And we came to Singapore because we could begin our clinical work much faster than in our country. Okay? We worked with the doctors, they understood. Professor Klima and Kofidis were ready to go. We worked with Professor Lee, who was at that time the head of the National University Hospital. And we were able to do that. And that hasn't really changed that much. We know how to create things and all that sort of stuff. But how to get started, we need environments like Singapore who are ready to go and willing to do the work. I'm still learning. Remember, I don't live here. I'm not here every single day, so I'm still learning what innovations do you have. In one of the trips today, I had a chance to visit a company and saw some of the work that they're doing in production and OEM business and stuff like that. They had the latest of technology. They had the ability to do what they're doing, okay? But I don't know if I saw any creativity. I didn't see a brand new thing. I saw, we can do this, we know this type of technique, we know how to do this, how to make this, and stuff like that. But the new things, okay? I did have a chance to visit a company called Biosensor, and again, see how they roll it out. In fact, the company said to me, the founder of the company said to me, Manny, why are you worried about the FDA? Why not forget about the FDA for the time being? Take your company, roll it out in the Asian Pacific market, make Singapore your headquarters, okay? Roll it out. The market is bigger than the US market, okay? Get strong, then you can handle the FDA and the hassle of the FDA. And I said, I honestly went back to that evening to my bed and I was thinking about it and I said, that does make a lot of sense. Can we do that? I don't know. But I'm not afraid to look at it. I'm not afraid to think about it. And if it makes sense, let's try to do that. But, I've been in this business for a long time. And in that business, I find myself at times going the same old way and not trying new things, okay? And I've just realized on this trip, there are different ways of doing things. As we say, different ways of cutting the cat or trimming the cat or
Skinning a cat.
what do they call it?
Skinning the
I
cat.
forget, cutting the cat or whatever it is. We know there's different ways of doing it. And I must say, what I see here is that you can move faster. The market environment is as big as or bigger than the U.S. market. And why can't we do it that way? And so those are things that are happening. I wish that you could go to Minnesota. I always say that if anybody wants to visit me, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick you up at the airport. I'm going to take you to the headquarters, or not the headquarters, where these various medical companies, the Medtronics of the world, the St. Jude's, the Guidance, the SciMeds, all these kind of little companies. We have 450 of them. I'm not going to show you 450 of them, but I'm going to show you the big five, for example, where we started, a little hole in the wall. Take you around, show you how we've grown them. Then I'm going to take you to Manny's Steakhouse, feed you the best steak in the world, okay?
Best is
All right?
promised.
And this is the truth, okay? We have the best steakhouse in the world. And you will have I'm sorry?
I remember this promise.
Okay. Come on out, we'll take care of you. And you will see that still Minnesota is growing, it still has great technology. There is probably more mergers than ever before, okay? Because the big companies need big things to work with. They don't need another little widget or something like that. Whereas in this environment here, a small company can grow because there's interest in making that small company grow. I worry about small companies in the States with the environment, the regulatory environment, the reimbursement environment. It's so difficult. And the investing group is not there anymore. They're afraid to invest in small companies because of the regulatory environment. They say to me, Manny, it's hard to invest in a company like yours because you would then have to go through the FDA, which is a long, long, long path. Okay?
All right. So with that, let's give the floor back to the MC.
Okay.
Thank you, Manny and Dr. Tan, and to you all for the lively discussions. So, we would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Manny for sharing his insights and spending time with us this evening. May I invite Mr. Pei Rui Feng, SSB Program Director, on stage to present a token of appreciation to Dr. Manny.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Real pleasure. Real pleasure. And thank you so much.
I think we're supposed to pose.
We pose. Okay, let's go. All right. Okay. Okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the event. On behalf of SSB Office, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that you have a good evening ahead. Thank you.